I will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. We don't need to do a roll call per se, I guess. We're gonna keep track of who's here.
Yeah,
Right. Those of you who have
Yes.
one of the agendas, we do have our mission statement and our vision statement listed there. Again, you're probably all familiar with that. The first item on the agenda today is a consent item to approve the agenda for the meeting today. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, any discussion, changes? If not,
I have
yes.
one thing that I've wondered about, Tom. There is so much in the scope of the three items under new business.
Yes,
And I know the regular committee business, I just don't want some of the things to get lost. And I don't know if this is typically done, but would we be able to set a time frame on the new business and say, at this point, I believe we could talk about this until it gets dark tonight and we still wouldn't be done. So could we possibly set a time frame on that or change the order? I don't really want to change the order either, I guess.
Michael,
I know for the items, besides the selection of the chair and vice chair, my items, each of those would be a maximum of maybe 5 to 6 minutes each.
Okay,
Five maximum, because they'll be later, well, I lied, one of them would be about 10 minutes. The enhanced stabilization expenditures would be about 10 minutes discussion. The position of Medicaid risk is information. It'd be 5 minutes for me to articulate why you have all this information in the packet. And then the other one be the same. So I need a total of maybe 20 minutes for those three items, maybe less.
okay.
Will that suffice?
It answers my question. It
Yes.
gives us enough time.
But you're right, you know me, I could talk about any one of
Well, I
those
didn't
for
wanna
an hour and
say
50
that.
minutes.
But I think we all could at this point. There's so
Yeah,
much.
great. Okay, any other issues? If not, we'll call a vote on the agenda. All those in favor of approving the agenda, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And no old business. We are gonna have a public comment period at the end of the meeting. If anybody here would like to make some comments prior to our discussion for information for us to consider in our discussion, we certainly would entertain that. We don't want to shut off comments, but if anybody does have anything they want to offer before we get into the agenda items, we're open to that.
I think several providers here are happy to make comment if it's helpful early.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
I'm Krista Mason, Benjamin's Hope, and I know many of these facts I've shared with you over time, but as you're considering the crisis that exists for residential providers, just a quick recap, if I could. And I imagine my information probably represents several of us here. Since 2018, the cost of care at Benjamin's Hope has increased by 112%. Of the Medicaid funded services, that's about 88%. Which is predominantly the cost of direct care workers, the labor expenses that we're all managing. Presently, the daily rate that we receive from Ottawa covers about 70% of the cost of care. And of course, I think we've all appreciated the millage funding over the last number of years. And in the absence of millage funding, it presents a significant risk to the services that we provide the men and women who live at Ben's Hope. So I think I speak for all that we deeply appreciated the attention to the residential crisis that exists, that I think Dr. Bashir's brought up probably his first week back in the seat. And just want to share with you that I can't overstate the urgency of this. For Ben's Hope, we will need to raise well over $1 million to cover that Medicaid gap. And our community is amazing and supportive. And I'm concerned that there is a limit which will affect the quality of care and the people that we can serve. Thank you.
thanks. Anyone else care to make a comment? You'll have an opportunity at the end of the meeting as well for public comment. We'll move on to the new business, the selection of the committee chair and vice chair. We don't have definitive instructions or regulations in our bylaws about committee structure. So according to Robert's Rules of Order, the best adaptation I can find of this is that we will accept nominations for the positions. No seconds are required, and then we'll have a vote, and whoever is selected chair can then take over the meeting. Again, because we have members absent today, I did have a conversation with Bob, and he was interested in placing a person's name in nomination, but he's not going to be here. We don't accept, I think according to Robert's Rules of Order, participation in decision making, and according to the Open Meetings Act, participation remotely in voting issues. So even if Bob were able to call in today and participate, he would not be able to vote on that particular item. So I offered to place his nomination on the table for everyone's consideration. And that would be to nominate Bonnie as the chairperson for this committee. And then the next question would be, would you be willing to accept that if you were voted in? Okay, and then do we have any other nominations for the chair of the committee? Okay. I think, again, not following Robert's Rules of Order, there's a tradition in Ottawa County where we say 3 times, are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? And we will close the nominations. So we have one candidate, and the question then would be, do we vote to appoint Bonnie committee chair? We'll call that vote by voice vote. All those in favor of the motion respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. I'll turn it over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Tom.
Oh, we need a vice chair. Do you want to do the vice chair nominations?
Are there nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Sylvia for that.
Sylvia, would you accept that nomination? Are there any other nominations? Say 3 times, huh?
Mhm.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations for vice chair? We'll close the nominating process and we'll go on to our vote. All in favor, please indicate, Sylvia being the vice chair, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Sylvia. And now we'll move on to look at the enhanced stabilization expenditures. Dr.
Sure.
Bashir.
With your permission, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the other 2 items before that item, because it will have a nice logical progression and thought. And if I would have thought of that, I would have put them in the correct order originally. So I'd like to move to the Ottawa and the CMH board position on risk, because they're connected. And then we'll put in the proper context any other discussion we have related to finances or emergency expenditures. So with your permission, I'd like to do that.
Yes.
Okay, so in your packet, there was quite a bit of information related to this thing called risk. And what is in there, if you have a packet and you're in the audience, is a letter from our corporate counsel here at the county, Douglas Van Essen. That's attachment A. A letter directed to Dr. Elizabeth Hartel. I don't know if she's a doctor, but okay. And when you see the CC of this memo, it's pretty much everybody, the Attorney General, Ottawa County, Michigan legislators, Lakeshore Regional Entity, CMH Association of Michigan, and me, and everybody else in the known world. And what this document says is the county council's position. And I gotta say, it's not the official position of the county, because we're waiting for a response. But the corporate council's position, making it known that in the event of a Medicaid deficit, we're part of the Lakeshore Regional Entity, We participate in what I believe is a risk pool with Medicaid, meaning that if there's a deficit, we pay a portion, the region pays a portion, the state pays a portion. This document says that it's his position that the Ottawa County could not use county general funds, period, to address any Medicaid deficit. And he goes on to cite several key sources for this. And the reason why this is important is that for our entire history as a community mental health, it's also a county position. This really hasn't been pushed to the max. If the system runs out of Medicaid, the regional entity which we're part of kind of falls apart, and there's a huge Medicaid deficit, who picks up the cost? And this document says, we do not as a county with county general funds. The organization could use other local funds, however, we're defining that as still not defined. So I want everybody to understand that I am managing the organization as if we had such a liability, that we have to pay attention to the Medicaid expenditures. And I'm not suggesting that corporate counsel is suggesting that we spend willy-nilly, but his position is something that he is seeking clarity from the state. So as the CEO, I don't necessarily mind the position because it requires the state to answer it, but it is the opposite position of every other CMH in the state. Just so we're aware of this. Some are county departments, some are not. And to back that up, because Doug gave me a challenge, he said, prove it with paper. Well, I asked, and the board association with other CMHs came together and said, please do our own legal examination on this and also the state's plan to restructure the impact. And there are positions listed in this related to risk, and they're kind of, we can go through the highlighted parts if you want, but it essentially says, no, a CMH organization as a member of the region, if the region runs out of Medicaid, and there's a liability, the partners share in making the difference. And it actually says county departments are actually more at risk than less at risk, and cites all kinds, and had 500 pages of exhibits and all kinds of stuff. But I'm letting folks know at the finance committee and the general public, this is a question that we're asking and not, as of today, a fundamental position of Ottawa County. That would come at the will and decree of the county commissioners as a whole and the CMH board to understand the ramifications. So I might have scared the bejesus out of folks with all of this information in the packet, like all of this stuff. It's to really simply say, we're looking into this issue. And we're looking into this issue because of any Medicaid deficit in any year. But as the CEO hired by the board, I'm viewing my role as to manage the budget as if we were at risk until further notice. So make financial decisions saying we have a stake in this. We can't just let the expenditures go willy-nilly. So those are two exhibits are, and I entertain any questions from the board on any specifics in them, or to cover more about this. Kind of information only to be determined, but I didn't want you to be in the dark while these things are happening.
So I just had one question. I think I know the answer, but just to make sure. So in that second document, they outlined, the 3 different types of entities, and I'm on page 11 of it.
Yes.
So it's county community mental health agencies, community mental health organizations, or community mental health authorities, and we are number 1.
We are
correct?
an agency, correct.
Okay.
Which in this document says we're at risk.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And along the same lines, Kent County is what
They are a authority.
so
Hi.
different.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So, hi, Don. They are not at risk. They're not at risk according to this as the same document, right? Within this in the same way. But they are expected under the current arrangement, we all believe, to manage their Medicaid budget and not to just say, oh, well. Now, I will say, if you go to a Network 180 meeting, they'll say owed by the LRE in their budget. assuming the regional entity is going to cover the Medicaid expenditures with the internal service fund, the rainy day fund, if funds are available. But we are, Muskegon and us and three others are county departments, the rest are not, they're authorities as listed in this. And an organization is a combination of counties coming together. And there can just be called an organization or form an authority if they want.
So Kent is an organization then?
They are they are not an organization, they are an authority.
They're an
So they would be on page 12. And by the way, the county commissioners at any time can change the status of a CMH. At any time, any county could say, you know what, happened in Washington, let's bring you back in as a county department. Because if we're kind of at risk, their interpretation, we need to help manage it because the county's at risk.
Mhm.
Our attorney has the opposite worldview, so I'm kind of skating this line. I know I'm at 6 minutes and 32 seconds, but I'm going. But it's important to understand that a decision on this will help us handle how we approach handling deficits, not our responsibility to manage.
I think it's really important that we clarify this
Yeah.
so that we know what the risk is and, and
Yeah.
even assess, should we be something different? Should we be the same? So I appreciate having, another opinion and have that been forwarded onto corporate counsel.
Yes.
Okay.
And corporate counsel, I'm sorry, didn't we have Donna walk in? I'm like, where'd she go?
She just stepped out.
Okay, okay. So corporate counsel has reviewed it and has given an initial response of like, let's wait to see what the state says.
Yep, okay.
Which I thought was the good response, besides him saying they may not understand county.
Yep.
Govern, the same way the county laws are, and our corporate counsel does understand county stuff better than probably no one else right now in the state. So that's why it's imperative that we get the state to weigh in. If they do, they have no obligation to answer our letter.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It did go to the state though.
Yeah.
So we can.
And it's quite possible, Michael, that some of the other CMHs in discussion with their county commissioners might have erroneously assumed that the county has a responsibility and the counties might have in fact contributed money.
Right?
And Doug's position is they don't have a right to do that with
Correct.
public funds.
Yeah.
So it is a valid issue.
Mhm.
It is a very valid issue. And any county at any time can increase its appropriations of general fund to match general fund in the state. We know that. So like Ottawa County could say, you know what, we're gonna give more general fund, but for general fund services only. Okay, Medicaid's totally different. And this is where our guy is saying, this is different. And that's important. It has huge ramifications in the system. And I'm glad we're asking it. And it's more to come for this group. We did have a meeting. I invited Tom to attend with corporate counsel, the county administrator, all kinds of people to look at this issue. And our overwhelming response was, let's see what the state says. And if it doesn't say anything, keep putting pressure on them to do so.
Mhm.
I thought it was a good meeting, some good dialogue back and forth. And we had to educate what CMH does and counties telling us the rules there. And so it was a good meeting. It was a good meeting. So I wanted to bring these to your attention early with some source documents so that in July, if there's an answer, you'll know what the heck we're talking about. And the public will as well. So those are really those two items, unless there are further questions related to.
Michael, it was interesting. There was, page 7 has a discussion about waiting lists. And
Yes,
if you remember, over the years, we've been repeatedly told that we cannot have waiting lists. That Medicaid services are an entitlement and our job is to deliver them. But here, there's a discussion saying, well, if you're not delivering them, then you have to have a waiting list. Well, but we're not supposed to have waiting lists.
yes. And really, the way to interpret that is if you have a waiting list, which apparently may be allowable, beware.
Mhm.
Because our contract with the state and with the region says absolutely no. But there are instances in Medicaid programs where there just isn't enough resources and a waiting list is developed, but they're highly scrutinized. And so it may seem like a contradiction. It's just like the marching orders are, you can't have one, because if you do, boy, are we gonna get really examined by the feds. and by our own state. And I would imagine if the funding doesn't improve on the Medicaid side in this state, this is indeed what will happen. And there may be, quote, unofficial waiting lists. It's not a waiting list, but we know people are kind of waiting until the situation is so unbearable, they can't wait anymore, which is precisely what happens on the residential side. So, yes, that was a good catch. I was like, oh, okay. But to everybody out there, it's our position, we cannot have a waiting list. And we will manage the organization that way unless we can't, and then the whole world will know.
And there was also a discussion I think it was in Doug's letter about if we are required to bail out deficits using county GF funds to do that, you're imposing a restriction on the county where you're requiring them to perform services but not providing the additional funds to do that,
Correct,
which would be a Headley Amendment violation.
correct.
And we've had this discussion in other avenues, like road funding, for example. And it seems as though we have a Headley Amendment that is selectively applied and recognized. And when it's not convenient, then it's disregarded. So that also factors into our dilemma here. We are required to deliver services as the agent for DHHS. But in that requirement, what if we don't have the funds needed to do it? They have a requirement then to provide the funding for us.
Correct. Correct. Well, that's what those information was for, and they're for further review in digesting of both those documents, and as more information comes out, I will bring it to this committee and the full board's attention.
Thank you.
You okay with me moving on?
Sure.
All right, so I created a term the committee understands. I've created the term enhance stabilization expenditures. So what do I mean by that? I've been here almost a year, hasn't been a full year yet, 3.5 quarters. And I've noticed in our expenditure items, especially for providing supports with individuals that have traumatic needs, that we have a group of people that we are spending close to $6 million on in what I call this term, enhanced stabilization expenditures. These are individuals that live in residential or natural settings that require one-to-one staffing, either while awake or around the clock, high physical health care needs, high behavioral needs, that clearly, in my belief, go beyond some of the original thinking of, say, specialized residential or CLS in a natural setting. It's a group of individuals that will have costs more than $500 a day in expenditures. And so what I've been doing the last couple of months is gathering data, putting some reports together to highlight and put into bands these individuals' costs and why they're so needed, and then how we're getting paid by the region and the state to take care of these individuals who are our most needy, and I will defend till the last day of my employment. The bottom line is, it's my analysis that you will see a comprehensive presentation in July's Finance Committee and the full board to demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that these expenditures are not included in the thinking of the money we get from the regional entity and the state. And they're aware of it. When you add all this together, it could be close to $6 million. And there's at least 3 million that I know is just way beyond what one would say is a traditional specialized residential setting or CLS in the home. So I'm bringing this up to preview in July. When I come to this committee, we're going to have a presentation by the group of individuals that I helped build this. It's IBH, it's Dr. Darren Lubers, about some of our residential expenditures, how we're looking at them, how we're looking at different costs, and how we're looking at outliers, so that you get the detail that's part of the justification, besides emergently needing to raise some rates, on why we're viewing this and our plan to address it comprehensively. I'm working on it now, but in July, you're going to get, it will be a lengthy item, Madam Chair. It will be about an hour on that discussion that will allow, and we'll record it, and will allow us to see this issue and how I'm bringing it to the attention of the region, the state, and our partners. And I think it will demonstrate that the state of Michigan and the way that we do our rate setting in the region, how much Medicaid we get, does not have this in their variables at all. And so we'll need advocacy to put it in there. So I've created a new thing for the Finance Committee to track. Enhance stabilization expenditures. And over the July, next couple of months, I'll be looking at stuff like autism services and other groups of services that the expenditures are going up, things beyond our control. And how we're fundamentally looking at them and addressing those issues. Dr. Bashir, why are we seeing this now in June, maybe not July, and 3 months ago? It's taken this long to figure it out in some of these cases and to truly get information that's valid to track these expenditures when we look at them from a certain perspective. It's taken a while. So that item is also to let folks know in your budget today, in your packet today, there are rate increases for a couple of providers that I'm deemed needed immediately due to being notified that if these don't happen, and I'm telling you, at the minimal, these are not even the full amounts providers asked. At a minimum this month, we would be at risk this fiscal year within months of losing close to 40 people's placements. So I would not put this in the budget if I didn't think this year, if it wasn't emergent. And when we get to that topic in the budget, I will talk about ways to address that deficit, funding, all of those things there. But this is in the category. We have, for close to 10 years, legitimately used millage dollars to stabilize residential services when in my belief, it's fundamentally a Medicaid problem and the responsibility of this region. I'd go last with like 2 minutes left. To further bolster this, I handed out walking in, and there's copies for people coming in, the executive summary that I asked and the region participated in doing a survey of residential rate setting determination within the region. You can read the key findings. I'll just read a couple of them. Significant cost variability in the region. Mean per diem rate varied by 26% across all the CMHs in the region. We were at the low end. Inconsistent procurement and rate setting procedures, strategies range from open competitive models to sole source close arguments. Sometimes in the region, we asked what your costs were. Sometimes we didn't. I have the last 8 months. When you go through this, you will see that every single aspect, from determining who needs residential care, to determining the rate, to determining the direct cost and what the costs are, vary in our region. And this calls for, finally, a regional approach to address the varying residential cost. Ottawa County can't wait another year for this to get done. We're taking action now to stabilize our most vulnerable and levels of care that are well below the average in our region. And we will continue this examination, hopefully in conjunction with the region and our partners. So this document is to validate, if you're a residential provider, what you've known since the region was begun. There is no continuity or consistency on how we determine the rate for the same exact person with the same similar needs within GEM. We're trying to fix that in Ottawa. You know, I've been engaged in an 8-month process to do it. And the increases in today's budget is related to an immediate need to stabilize at least 40 placements. Or we will be looking for other placements that will be actually twice as costly because they'll be out of county, the majority of them. And you'll see in our analysis in July, out of county placements cost us more. I'm able to show you that and show you the impact of that. And we're looking at how much does it cost if somebody stays in their home or other settings with 24 hours support. Those are also what I call enhanced stabilization expenditures that are not fit it in to our budget. So that's why it was there, to introduce a new monitoring and a new level of analysis that you'll start seeing in July and every month of how I'm defining what these mean. These are unintended expenditures that we must do to stabilize people's lives. And then to what degree can we predict them over time? So that this category shrinks and everything becomes predictable. Wouldn't that be nice? So that's why it's listed there as an introductory to this. And when we get into the actual budgets, you'll see why. And I want to let the committee know, I intend to have an analysis of these every single finance committee. And you'll see them. So you don't think we're just handing out rates to people because they're asking. Far from the truth. I want to thank residential providers for fundraising close to 40% of your budgets in a system that should pay 100% of personal care and CLS cost. Thank you for doing that.
Dr. Richards, under limitations, it states that the analysis excludes the one-to-one staffing data.
Yes.
Is it projected that that will also be included in, I mean, that seems to be a huge.
It is a huge thing. We do it, right, Leah? You will see that next month for us. I've urged the region to do the same methodology we're using. They're excluding all the outliers. So in their report, they only have the average, the mean. That's the wrong statistic of measure of central tendency you need to look at. So yes, we need to have that included in a regional approach so we can define outliers correctly. And then we know what to advocate for at the state level for additional funding. You will see that first analysis in July. It's quite expensive, isn't it, Leah? Yeah.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions for Dr. Bashir?
I'd like to make a comment. The objectives that you've listed here were part of the original challenge to the regional entities when they were established. The promise was that they would provide stabilization of services and rate reimbursement for services. It never happened. So again, it was part of the illusion of benefit that just never materialized. So I'm glad to see you're finally buttoning it down for us.
Yeah, I would tell you, Tom, that regional entity under its current leadership wants this.
Mhm.
It's us partners that have caused the issue. It's the partners. All of us CMHs agreeing. We can't even agree on the color of whatever. And the region has tried, since I've been there, to do this. It's now inevitable that we either do it or it deserves to go away.
Well, that brings up a question. The proposed reorganization of the PIHP system would exclude the members from being part of a corporate decision-making body. Do you think that would be a benefit to us, or would we wind up losing input to the process?
If you haven't watched my hour and whatever presentation I did last week, which scared everybody to death, wasn't my intent. Tom, I would say too early to tell specifically, but I will tell you what, under the general principles of the proposed restructuring, we would no longer be in the business of setting rates for residential providers. There'd be no local decision-making in that with us, with their partners. Now, some of the providers might be like, hallelujah, maybe we'll get what we need. I'm not so sure, but we would not be a manager of care at all. Except for general fund and non-Medicaid services, we would be a provider of Medicaid services alone, unless they significantly change what they're proposing, which I hope they do. It just, and if you haven't seen it, watch it. I say I wish I was being dramatic, but I'm not. I go through the state's proposal, the consequences, and then what I think we need to do, but it's too early to tell to know. But I would tell you, it's one of the reasons why the state's doing this is because the regions, all 10 of them can't work together and do this. I mean, they try to get this solved. And within our own region, it's had a history that the partners have been at odds with each other, to be honest. I got one focus, citizens of Ottawa County, and to be good partners with people. But yeah.
So one other question along those same lines is, I noted in some of the materials that, the state actually should be contacting the federal level already on this, but they haven't,
They have not.
do we know anything more on that? Like,
Yeah.
when they might? or-
Well, they're gonna have to.
Mhm.
And what we're talking about is that even though this is different than any other restructuring bid, where before it was a bill from a member of the legislature. This is the department bidding it out via contractual language. And one of the requirements is that CMS has to approve any restructuring.
Mhm.
I think they're waiting to see, once they send out the application to see who's eligible, then to send it to the CMS to say, here's our plan, here's how we're gonna do it, here are the partners. CMS could say no. They very rarely do, just so you know. If it's somewhat intelligible, they're like, all right, it's your state. But they may have some concerns with that. And so I think when the specific information on the reorganization comes out, maybe in July, I'm betting right before July 4th, by the way, they'll release it. Then we'll get a sense, and I'll of course do an analysis and bring it to everybody. But
Okay.
yes, they do have to get that permission to change it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For discussion. Now we'll move on to item 6, our regular committee business. We have both some new service contracts and amended renewed, and Dr. Shears.
Yeah.
Would you review this with us, please?
Okay. Now, just for the committee's thought, one of the reasons why I took over describing these is when we were meeting with the full board. And being new to the board and being new to us, I took it my responsibility to understand these and present these, because you're placing your trust and board to your employee to do all the due diligence. There may be times in the finance committee, I ask specific directors of a program for a new contract to talk about it, or the contracts department. So you might see in this committee, sometimes I'm saying, here's what I think, and go, Stacy, right? Of course, I'll prepare them first, right? But you can expect a little bit more dialogue by department heads of the programs that these are impacting at the committee level. And then me continuing answering questions at the full board level, if that's okay. Because we're thinking this is more of a dialogue and you get to dig in. So the first set are related to, I believe, are these the amended ones? I can't see.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and we'll just take the amendment ones. A lot of these are increases like number one, due to one-to-one staffing support. And one of the things I'm gonna have to figure out with this committee and the full board is there sometimes changes to a existing contract that adds a service that wasn't originally in the contract, like one-to-one or a different rate for that. And over time, I want to look at the possibility of, if it's an amendment and it's under a certain budgetary amount, that I may not have to keep bringing it back to get approval for every amendment for every contract that we have. So it's for something to us continue for the future. But anything that has, whatever range we want to say is a monetary increase to our existing budget. The region right now is using 100,000, some use 50,000, just depends if you want to set a limit. I wouldn't have to bring back here because it's still within the kind of like a budget line item for that total budget. Say if it's like the residential budget, if it's still within those parameters. So that's what the first one is there. It's related to adjusting one-to-one staff. We have one for increasing the rate for MOCA. And this is a fallout of this home being, I know MOCA's here too, not at the right rate for quite a while. And due to, believe it or not, other CMH's reductions that have other people in the home, they could no longer keep our rate, which was traditionally lower than everybody else's, the same. So we're not taking over for Network 180. It's not like a tariff like they did theirs and we did. I thought that at first. But it really is getting the rate to where it really needs to be for this particular home. It's only highlighted more because they've had other reductions in that company by Network 180. I think it's close to $700,000 worth of reductions.
Close to that, correct.
Right. And so this isn't a correction for that. This is an acknowledgement of, okay, if this home's gonna stay open, we really can't wait any longer to have it up to this particular rate, which is still below the average of other regions, other CMHs in our region. This is a way to keep this home open. If not, MOCA has indicated they will have to close this home. And these residents will have to move somewhere else. It's a compounding of issues. So I'm not asking to increase the rate because Network 180 decreased their overall rates. I'm asking to get to rate up to, okay, we're not using millage anymore to stabilize it. This is what we gotta do. And, MOCA's here, but that's what that one's about. If you have any questions, those first two, I'll take them. And then the big one is 4. Harbor House Ministries. I find this kind of ironic. When I was first here, one of my first actions as executive director then was to put 8 people in that home. I'm looking right at you because you remember, okay? And we started this journey with Harbor House, who has provided care for some of the most vulnerable people that we have in our system, high medical need individuals, total care and bathing, toileting. We started this journey. I find myself in a position to try to keep it open now. And why? Because for years, through your grace and this CMH partnership with you, the rate has stayed way below the average for people of that level of care. The average is around $427 in our region. We've been paying $2 something a month. And the fundraising has just run out. And I believe you're in a deficit, and I received formal notification that some significant decisions would have to be made. We have 30 people there. Well, yeah, 32, 2 of them are ours, but we manage kind of, yeah. Well, we're concerned with all 32, but I'm only paying the rate of 30. So this is a dramatic emergency funding request for close to $300,000, which isn't the annualized contract increase for this. That's also listed here, that we were trying to build in our budget for next year. But this is needed to prevent a dire emergency. And I know that it was very difficult for Harbor House to send me a letter that said, if this doesn't happen, so. And so I want to recognize how difficult that was for you to write and to send to me. But we also didn't want to scare the staff all away the last month or two. This is needed, I believe, for a continuance of this placement. And Leah and I, who does our residential program with me and others, we've looked at where will we find somewhere else for these folks to go? Not in this county. And the rate would be close to $800 a day if we could find a placement. And I can prove that. You'll be able to see that next month. So this is an emergency increase to increase this contract line item to get still below the average of the region to stabilize these placements. But Doc, what if everybody does that? I'm looking case by case, asking, we're drilling down. We're getting into individual discussions. The message has been, can't increase the funding unless it's an emergency this year. And next year we got to build it in the budget while trying to figure out our revenue and all kinds of stuff coming in. And I think the providers have been saying, okay, if we can do that. So this is the big ticket item on our finance committee, and I'll take any questions on that.
This isn't specific to Harbor House, but just, like you said, this was not built into our budget.
Of course not.
Where is the money coming from? Again, I mean, it's, yeah,
All right.
I don't question at all the need.
No. All right. So what happens? Okay. So Dr. Bashir's, if you create a Medicaid deficit, how do we deal with it? Right. Because we don't control, unless we sign people up in Medicaid real quick, which is on the chopping block to get cut in terms of the eligibility, right? Unless we're finding new Medicaid people in the county, hey, our revenue doesn't go up. Ever. It stays where it is on enrollees. And so that's why we're part of the region. I'm going to answer your question. I'm just going to do it in 2 stages. That's why we're part of the region that has the only way for us to have an internal service fund, which is our rainy day fund for Medicaid expenditures. I've informed the region of this increase. I've informed them of planned use of the ISF if we have to, if by the end of the year, and I'm going to talk about some potential revenue increases and some other things that we've been doing, we don't break even. I suspect we'll have a Medicaid deficit at the end of the year, but not nearly as large as we may think. You'll hear later in the financials of that. It's based on two principles. One, we've been successful in getting 140 of the $200 million the state was withholding to be sent to the system. We are learning this week and maybe a little bit last week, how much the region will get of that. Could be 5 million, could be 10 million, could be 3 million, we don't know. Of that, all of our rates for Medicaid rates are gonna be repopulated back to October 1st. So we're gonna get a rate adjustment, increase Medicaid all the way back to October 1st for our Medicaid payments from the region. That may be $1 million for us, maybe 2 million, maybe 500,000. We're getting close to that now. The Medicaid Internal Service Fund at the region is sufficient to cover any deficit that we project this year. Okay, so we know that is a source of income. And I don't know if this board realizes it, that in the things that we do control, we have controlled over $2.4 million in staff expenditures due to freezing positions, vacancies, and other looking at turnover rates within the county. And I had finance send me that number last week. It's always plus or minus based on assumptions, but we are controlling what we can control. Unlike other CMHs with deficits, we've held back certain things to the tune of projected, with our logic, 2.4 million, at least 900,000 for sure. So things we can control, staffing cost. We've increased our utilization management structure considerably over the last 6 months to look at autism, to look at residential expenditures, and even though they keep going up, not the same rate that they were going up, say, the end of last year. So where's the money come from? Increased revenue from the state, and increased use of the Internal Service Fund. Some of our CMH partners in the region are lapsing money, believe it or not, Medicaid, they have extra Medicaid, and that will come to the partners if that happens. So with this and other increases in utilization, I think we're on target to either have a Medicaid deficit or none, like but not a gigantic Medicaid deficit. Gigantic to me is over $2 million. So we may be in that range. And you remember, it wasn't until last November that we knew where the books were. I'm in a budget meeting with the county, and Karen, the finance person in the county, says, we never know when the revenue, like what it is until it's too late. Yeah, I know. Ask Amy, and she deals with it every month. But to answer your question, any increase in Medicaid would not be done at this point unless we felt like the consequences weren't severe enough, or the potential increases in expenditures in another area would be severe enough to mandate. And that's tough because we don't control a lot of the Medicaid expenditures in the way that people think, because we don't control the front door and we cannot deny services. Other companies could just say, we're not doing any. Not doing any more residential placements or anything for the rest of the year. The other arm of this is I'm in negotiation. I'm talking to the region and the state about extra Medicaid based on these unexpected stabilization expenditures. And I can demonstrate that our rates do not include thinking of this. And I'm going to be working tirelessly to get this to be known with my partners, so that the amount of money we get per region increases based on the true need of the residents. The need's not captured. Michael, you're gonna do that in 6 months? No one thought we could push out $140 million in 3 months either. Okay, in Ottawa, we're gonna be looking at all those levers, but we are controlling what we can control, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the staff. So yeah, increase the budget there. I think with the increase, I think in late July, August, we'll see kind of the trending. I anticipate increase in some still placements in residential that we'll need to do throughout the year. We're scrutinizing each one of them to make sure it's now the time, right? And we have a lot more internal controls related to residential services than we had in years past. And I think it's starting to pay dividends. But boy, the list could be, I mean, we could have, if we had certain family members kind of like say we couldn't do it anymore, we'd have 50 people, I'm not exaggerating, that we'd have to place. It's about $120,000 a year. Do the math. That's the average placement. It's over 100,000 a year. We have some 300,000. One placement costs us like 600 grand a year for one person. I don't know if I adequately answered your question, if I just gave you a razzmatazz of 6 different things. What I'm saying is we're being diligent. We believe more revenue is coming. And we believe we're gonna get close to being able to close this gap. But I can't say with all certainty at this point.
Well, that's encouraging. The LRE partners, how many of them would we anticipate would be looking at the same issue we are?
Well, I think that's a great question, because some of our partners, we're below the regional average of how much we pay for residential, besides the outlier fees, folks we're talking about. So I think a lot of them would be like, I wish we had Ottawa's rates, to be honest with you. The providers wouldn't like that because they couldn't stay open, and they barely can now. But I think that we're looked at a little differently. I get looked at as like, boy, you're really trying to increase. But I'm trying to address things that probably through Medicaid should have been addressed over the last 5 years in a steady increase, instead of using millage to do it. Network 180 is doing the opposite of what we're doing. They're reducing specialized residential rates, right? Home Network's closing 4 homes next week or next month. It's gonna happen. They don't believe it, but it's going to happen. In one of the reports we saw, I know Anna, the CEO, and I were looking at this, 46% of all Network 180's expenditures are residential. I couldn't believe that. And so when they have a deficit, the only thing they can do is adjust that big ticket item in addition to other things if they were doing those, right? Because it's half their expenditures. Ours around 30-something%, right? So when you have a major deficit like you have in other counties, reducing residential rates there may make sense in the short term, but long term, it's my belief it will cost you more money in the end. Because you have to serve those individuals. But I think our media partners would say, some of them would say, wow, okay, welcome to the party, up to where we are at. Now, they won't like the fact that we may have a Medicaid deficit that the regional rainy day fund would cover, but that's what it's there for. We're kind of, my opinion, right sizing and then highlighting the high need folks. Highlighting the high need folks differently than anybody else has ever done.
As I see the situation, we have 2 issues here. One is efficacy of providing cost of service to the providers so that they can remain solvent.
Right.
What's fair is fair. And that's separate from issues dealing with the regional entity and our share of Medicaid funds.
Correct.
You're absolutely right. We have this quandary of being given a mandate and then having inadequate funding in order to implement that mandate. So we have a tactical issue here. By facing reality and forcing the issue by starting to provide adequate funding for the services that are being provided, we not only stabilize and preserve our provider network and services to the people who rely on them, but we also validate our argument to the state that you are underfunding us.
Correct.
And that's a separate issue that we have to address. But I think doing this is going to buttress our argument. We're going to say, here it is. We're starting to pay more equitable rates. We're preserving the network of services. Now you guys have to step up and give us our fair share. The issue with Medicaid funding is because it's based on the law of averages.
Correct.
And my favorite quote, or one of my favorite quotes of Mark Twain is, I'm reminding of my friend who died crossing the stream, the average depth of which was 3 feet. Well, we are that deep hole in the river right here. And it's because I can remember in the past when we were providing services in Ottawa County that our neighbors were not. And people were calling DCH at the time saying, well, how come the people in Ottawa are getting this such and such a CLS service and we don't? And their answer in Lansing was, well, move to Ottawa. And I can tell you, there were several people who took that path. They actually uprooted their families and moved to Ottawa because they could not get services for their family member in another county. Well, what does that do? They move here and then knock on the door requesting services. We're obligated to provide it. It does not help. We didn't get, the money didn't follow the individual. And we wound up using whatever money we had now to share a larger population. So, and I know you're well aware of this, we need to come up with a way of adequately reimbursing the CMHs for the actual clientele that they're serving, not the number of DABs or TANFs they have enrolled in Medicaid in their county. And I know you're gonna be addressing that issue on the statewide level.
Right,
But because I see them as separate issues, and I would like to make a motion that we approve the amended contracts that you've provided here on attachment C, and recommend that the full board consider approving them at their next meeting.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion?
I would just like to follow up on what you were saying, in that I really support us dealing with, so I agree with your separation of the two issues. But as far as the lack of funds, I really, think it's important for us to do an actual assessment of what's needed at the same time that we're advocating with the state, because otherwise they're gonna say, why didn't you bring this up while we were talking about it, you know? So I think it's important that they have a realistic, you know, real
Yeah.
numbers of what's actually needed while we're having the discussion.
and intend in July, when you see that, to forward it to the state.
Mhm.
We should have done this a while ago,
Right.
as a region and as a state.
Mhm.
Just another comment or question that I have is, how many other providers that are not on this amended list would we anticipate making similar?
There will be recommended rate increases for most providers for next fiscal year. This fiscal year, I'm looking at emergent need. But we have, looking at our budget, and you'll see increases to other providers to get them at or above where the regional average is. So it wouldn't be every provider. We're creating a whole different kind of, I won't level of care system, kind of the highest need. They all have high needs, so I hate to use that term, traditional, specialized, and we have some residential providers that don't require 24-hour awake staff. And so we've developed and are finalizing a whole way of assessing people correctly, put them in the right tier, working with providers to say, what are the rate ranges based on their actual costs within the parameters we've defined. And to date, I don't think providers have been actually asked how much it cost you. You were pretty much saying, here's what we'll give you. So I would anticipate we would see increases based on a new level of care system we're developing, proposed and considered for next year's budget. And then we'll kind of know what the Medicaid revenue situation's right. We'll also know what the state's plan is for restructuring, because the state could have a plan to restructure that makes the question either more acute or moot, one of the two. And so if I wouldn't have had that, I would be able to say, you know, but I would anticipate any new contract for a new provider that you see, or a new bed, would be at a new rate that we're proposing based on our new model, which will be shown to the board and to this committee. So a lot of them, but maybe not to the same level of degree as these.
Thank you. Any other discussion or question? Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Thank you, motion carries.
For the new contracts, it's one new provider, like we talked about. And then, I need maybe Bill to explain this Waystar one for me, because I think I know what the heck it is. Maybe Amy, you Bill. But the first one is a residential provider to take a client with high needs at a rate that we believe is needed to do it. And then the other one is Waystar. Either you or one of you want to give a?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so now with our new electronic health record, Auto.
Right.
We have to contract with this provider, this Waystar, the clearinghouse. That will be able to get the information that we need so we can bill for services that we provide into Auto. Okay. I don't
Instead
know.
of billing to all of our insurance providers for any of our co-pays or co-insurance that any of our consumers might have. it's like a one and done, and we send all of our claims that we would bill out to insurances, and it sends it to all the insurance companies. on our behalf.
And
Yeah.
it's not a large sum of money.
No,
No.
but, you know, I keep thinking of OnStar or whatever, when I just
Yeah.
read it, I don't know how to explain the thing, even though I was thinking. Right, and you'll notice the committee that the number of new contracts we've had month to month are shrinking
Mhm.
and our amendments are growing. It stabilized the existing system, then look at new contracts. So a lot of the new contracts are out of necessity, like you have to have them because. But I don't know if you've noticed, when I first got here, the new contracts were like this big, and now and that's part of our, you know, element of this. Now, of course, next month I'll have like a whole bunch of new contracts and you call me a liar, but we really are trying to look at stabilizing the existing provider network and services versus anything new, especially when we're like, how do you pay for it? Right?
Now, Michael, if I can ask a question, I didn't have the time to research, the website to see where Zuri Communities is located. Are they here in Ottawa County?
Leah, you wanna talk about that one?
Well, they are right in Kent County, right, kind of, like Allendale, Walker-ish area, so super close to us, but not in Ottawa.
Okay. And we don't have any other residents there.
No, we do work with this provider, she just is starting another LLC, so you'll see the, for the amendment, we amended one of the dignified care. So it's the same provider, just, you know, it's doing another LLC, so it has to come through as a brand new contract. But this also is a brand new home as well.
Great, thank you.
I like this having them here.
Yeah, that's very helpful, thank you. So any other questions or discussion on the new contracts that are presented? Is there a motion to approve?
We approve them, the new contracts.
Anywhere?
Support.
Now it's been moved and supported. Any final discussion or questions? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you.
Good. Alright,
And well,
we're getting there.
are on our agenda here.
Financials.
Attachment E, looking at our financial statement.
Make that.
So we have, financial fund summaries for both the mental health and activity fund and the millage and grants fund. Same format as is presented for, the full CMH board. Couple things to highlight this month. This is, reporting through the end of May. As Dr. Bashir said, we do have some, highlights with, in particular, salaries and, fringe. We are showing good soft cost savings with, if you look at the expenses for both SUD and, traditional, or other salary and fringe. So 2.4 million in regular mental health salary and, almost 300,000 in, SUD salary and benefit savings. Client care is, you know, staying within a reasonable range. Overall, our actual, and this is based on our, revised, target percentage by month. We're actually below, a little below for the first month, expenses to revenues. So putting us in a healthy position. Our, you know, revenues continue to be, something that is a moving target that we're working on. More details as we get closer to the year end. But, with our net position, we are pretty close to, our total expenses, being pretty aligned with where we're projecting our revenues to be, even though it shows, a little different just because we have, 6 million that we haven't received in revenue, but we're also 3 million underspent for expenses, so that, you know, as
Yeah.
Dr. Brashears was trying to, or had said earlier, we're coming closer in those numbers. The LRE did just release the
Oh, good.
FS, the combined FSR like 3 hours ago, so I sent it to Amanda. We should have that by the next packet, so you can see regionally how we're doing. This is the first month in, I'm not sure how many months, but as a region, we're projecting a surplus for the year end right now. So, you know, some cautious optimism in our overall position for the fiscal year. And millage, you know, continues pretty straightforward. We're catching up to, we've made out most of our payments for our, contracted services that we have annually, contracted for through the RFP process for, specialized residential or, community partner programs and, other specialized millage services, so.
Yeah, and when I read this, I always have to remember that the parentheses and expenditures means a good thing. When I first read it, I'm like, oh, no, no, we want parentheses there. And
Yeah, it is hard when you look at
Yeah.
the net position, it's negative 3 million,
Right.
but we, are 3 million under on our expenses, and it's just that we had received the 6 million that we were anticipating revenues up to that point, so.
Could I ask a question?
Mhm.
Amy, the Medicaid revenues, we had budgeted to 23 million and we only have 19 million in income so far. Is that because of a lag in reimbursements for Medicaid? My understanding is the region gives us an allocation for the year and they advance that money to us on a monthly basis. Are they behind by several months?
There are two things that contribute to that. One is that you reclassify some of your Medicaid dollars as CCBHC revenue, and so that delays some of the payment, but it also reverts some of that original budget to CCBHC revenue. So this budget was based on that original allocation and our original projections of CCBHC, which some of that money kind of floats. And so whenever we haven't done adjustments, we did an adjustment at mid-year and we'll do another, you know, closer to the year end. We have a couple things that we're working on with the CCBHC in particular, as far as those revenues, but that's why that contributes to it. It's also that we receive, the payment is paid in two segments, as a prepayment and as a post-payment. So we've received the partial prepayment at this point when this report was run, but not the second part for that month. So we've only received half of the payment and we've reclassified some of it as CCBHC, so.
Can you guess what the catch-up will result in when you finally have made these adjustments and the second payments come in?
Right now through April with the LRE, which is where we're reporting, we're showing about $1 million deficit for fiscal year 25. But again, not knowing where all of that will land, but it is actually a much better position than we were showing earlier in the calendar year. So, we're hoping that that trend continues, but, you know, a lot of factors in play.
Well, along with the breakout here, for revenues, you show a separate category for the CCBHC the revenue streams of about 7.4 million for the year and 4.6 year-to-date budget, but only 3.6 actually received. I'm assuming that's because it's a fee for service. We provide the services, we send the bill in, and then we get reimbursed sometime later. But it looks like the expenses for CCBHC are all lumped into your general salaries and benefits expenses category. Is there a way to have a separate P&L for the CCBHC program that says, here are the actual expenses for CCBHC, and here are the actual revenues for CCBHC. We're breaking even, we're losing $100,000, we're making $100,000. This was a question that came up in the meeting we
Yeah.
had with the county representatives. We don't know at this point, is there going to be a deficit for the year for CCBHC? And where does the money come from to make up that deficit? That's not the regional entities' problem to make up. But I can't back into a number here from the way we just.
Right, so, the interesting thing about CCBHC is it is a component of the Medicaid capitation, and we receive a supplemental payment over and above what we would have received just for providing those services that are Medicaid eligible and CCBHC eligible. What happens and where the overspend can happen for CCBHC services are when we provide over, too many services for non-Medicaid consumers. That's where the costs end up going over, because we were already gonna provide those services. Those are all traditionally Medicaid fundable, and if they have Medicaid funding, we would have just used Medicaid for those services. So if we have more consumers that do not have Medicaid or general fund, state general fund funded, that's where we can overexpend. And right now, we have, as of in fiscal year 24, we had a small carry forward balance of state general fund. We did not exceed our local dollars for contributing to cover those expenses for CCBHC. And we're kind of in that same range. We're not expanding to a huge population of non-Medicaid consumers. We just don't have the bandwidth from our provider network is one big factor. So it's not like the cost to provide the Medicaid service the CCBH service would cost any more than if we just paid with Medicaid, if that
Right.
makes sense. But I know what you're getting at, and it's the service activity, and in
Right.
fact, we can maybe do some more of that, because that's been a big thing, is the costing of it, that I've been trying to re-demonstrate what our costing of CCBHC is to draw in more money. So that's one of the conversations we're having with the state.
With the state, with everybody else.
And-
To answer that specific question of how to calculate the expenditures correctly if you're not expanding out to non-Medicaid populations, right?
Yeah.
And so it got very confusing.
And as I recall, in reading the enabling regulations for the CCBHC program, we are permitted to shift existing Medicaid consumers into the CCBHC program and provide the services there and get reimbursed on a fee-for-service basis outside of the existing Medicaid funding. So there's a benefit in doing that, but the intent was that the CCBHC program would expand outreach into the community for people who were not entitled to Medicaid services. And you have to have the program in place to do that. And I understand we're at the point of saying, okay, we've got a program in place. Now we need to go out and create a market and find the people who are underserved and not served and bring them in. And when we do that, we can also draw down additional fee for service to cover that delivery of service. So I don't think we're doing anything unethical, but we're at a point here, I think, where, and I think it's a legitimate question for the county to ask, do we want to do CCBHC? Well, as I look at it, even if we're losing $100,000 a year, by the time you add up all of the expenses for CCBHC, we're shifting $1 million worth of Medicaid services from the Medicaid funding stream over into this pocket. And we're saving that money over here to use for other services. So I think it's beneficial, even if we come up with a paper loss.
And that's why the decision on risk is important. Because the county legitimate said, can you sign us up for a program that forces us to use county GF if you do it wrong? We didn't agree to that. Then our attorney says, doesn't matter anyways, we're not at risk for it. So I was like, oh, okay. But that is the rub, and we're kind of like in the front lines trying to figure this out.
Mhm.
And that's why when we're answering your question, it's kind of like, well, it depends on what, but we have been the topic of conversation within the region of the state now for about 4 weeks, 5 weeks on this. And we're gonna get an answer.
At the same time, we need to be looking at how many people have we reached who
Right.
would not, who, you know, are not currently Medicaid eligible. and
Yes.
Who, you know, who are we able to serve? with those?
Yeah, and it's moderate populations versus severe and persistent. There's a whole way of looking at it. You know, in Ottawa, we have a lot of providers that serve that group. And we have the millage we've been using in a way to help with that.
Mhm.
So it's all coming together,
Mhm.
but all of these is, I'm looking at Amy because we've been more than stressed out, like all these things are converging all at the same time in the month of June, right? And I'm glad it's not October it's happening, or September, it's now, but it's made for an interesting, end of the third quarter, fourth quarter type thing. Cause we had a proposal that would have increased the revenue considerably. Right, using CCBHC as a way of doing it, and it's like, well, if we let Ottawa do that, then everybody else could do that, and the system will go bankrupt. So we're kind of dealing with that, and what the right balance is, but unless we, I mean, if we don't extend out and we have plans to expand out a little bit, then the very nature of the program, you have to question, like, what are we doing with it?
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think the way it was explained by you, Michael, we came up with a budget for the CCBHC for 2025 based on anticipated expenditures. And now we're halfway through the year and our actual expenditures are different than that, plus or minus. And we can't go to the state and say, it's costing us $200,000 more than we had budgeted based on the prospective numbers. Their answer is, you're stuck with that for the year.
Right,
Yeah.
did the actual,
And
yeah,
next year.
and next year, yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, so like so Amy came up with a brilliant forecasting model. Everybody went, uh-oh, can you do it that way? And here we are.
The hard thing is because we've extended the conversation, it's hard for me not to, like, I had anticipated costs in February, now I have 4 more months of information, I'm like, oh, I can even,
Right,
you
could add
know,
more.
trying to like have that balance of being fair and equitable, how everybody presented it in February from their understanding of it, but also like, well, I know that these things have all happened and you know, trying to account for both up and down, like things that we have expended and things that we may not, and things that will cost us more that we hadn't anticipated.
Right,
So it's
yeah, and then you're locked in for like 24 months and. I mean, put it this way, you wouldn't do your home checking book like this at all.
No.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk tactics for a minute. I understand you've gone to the state and said our actual expenses are greater per individual served or per billable hour than what we had projected. Can we get a higher rate from the state? And they're balking at that, saying, well, if we do that, we're gonna give you more money than any other CCBHC program.
The strategy's changed a little bit. Now we're kind of like going, all right, we've met with the state, we've met with everybody. And as Amy likes to say, and I like to steal from her, now we understand the assignment of what they're really looking for. We're right sizing our proposal to meet that, so we're not an outlier, but still have an increase in revenue, just maybe not as large of an increase. Because it would mean that we'd have to state more expenditures than we want to, right? So we're kind of like in between the original assignment of like, hey, we can put everything in here. We'll get a higher payment on top of Medicaid. Let's do it. Well, it puts all that at risk in a different way. That's how the risk discussion came. And then it was also higher than any other person in the state had the rate would be. And so we stuck out like a sore thumb. And so now we're like, okay, given the assignment now, here's what we're gonna do. And we're still anticipating an increase in revenue for CCBHC with a more conservative view on expenditures, giving us some room. So that's the tactic now. And we're just waiting to hear back. I think we should hear any day now, like if they're gonna be okay with that. And that will impact that fiscal sheet when it does. I think I got it right. Is that,
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I think is the reason it's not our actual expenditures for CCBHC, it is the cost of being a CCBHC. Our actual expenditures for services that we provided that were accepted by the state as CCBHC eligible daily visits actually was less than the revenue we received.
Mhm.
So we didn't cost more for those services. We just operate an operation that's like 80%
right?
CCBHC. You know,
Right,
like
'cause the codes are
80% of our
eligible.
operation is a CCBHC service. So, you know, if we were just a CCBHC, it would cost us this much, even if we would only bring in, you know, this much in revenue. But the fact that, so for example, $10 million of our operation for payroll, that for CCBHC staff that provide CCBHC services is $10 million. But they may only provide $7 million of services. So if we were only gonna get $7 million in revenue for $10 million worth of people to do those services. So I was saying, really, if we're only talking about being a CCBHC, it should cost us 10 million. We need our rates to equate to the $10 million to
Yeah.
cover that.
The actual cost of care.
But it's tricky because they're just gonna be Medicaid services, so really, we're just kind of balancing part of that payment of what we would normally be receiving as Medicaid for those services.
Yeah, because the same staff are providing CCB and non-CCBHC Medicaid services. So it's not like it's like, remember, I was looking for the clinic when I first got here, so it was a distinct, separate thing. Unless you understand, it really isn't that. It's a funding source with billable codes that are allowable. Some of them are exact same codes if we didn't have CCBHC for a Medicaid person coming in. And so it's which bucket you put them in, how to do the expenditures. And that's the rub with this thing.
That's why, like, the expenses are all together in the budget, because, you know, I might be seeing 3 people today that only one of them has a CCBHC eligible service, but they're all the same service activity.
Right,
Just one was eligible, the other 2 were not.
right. So the
But I'm not
staff
gonna-
expenditures gonna,
Yeah, I'm not gonna have a person that does all the CCBHC only and then hire another person and they do the non-CCBHC.
right.
So has the state really figured everything out with CCBHC? I know we started as a demonstration grant here
Yeah.
in Ottawa. Did they use that information and say, now this is it, this is the way
They're-
moving forward?
I mean, Anna, the CEO, can tell you, but they're changing it all the time.
Okay, so the demonstration was.
It's still on right now. We're in
We're
it.
still in demonstration. So we do anticipate that there will be some feedback from us and others who are demonstration grants.
They're meeting almost weekly for feedback groups and update groups and the biggest thing now is the regions were part of the process. Where the payment, believe it or not, come from the state to the region to us. Now, the state's saying, starting in October, I think, it's going right from the state to us, and they're bypassing the region. So they're already setting up CCBAC to be conveniently not connecting the PHPs that they want to restructure out of business, but it's a different program. And so are we learning all the time? What we're learning is a lot of CCBHEs didn't really extend out to the degree that people thought they would. And so it's allowable for us to have a Medicaid client also get a Medicaid CCBHC. It's allowable because when you first read it, you're like, are you double dipping? Right? And the answer is no. There's firewalls within that. I've read through it, but I was concerned like, this is like a shim sham. We're just kind of moving it here. It's not. They just so happen to use the codes that are eligible for CCBHC are identical to a lot of the essential things of a CMH in Michigan, because in a lot of other states, they don't have our system and they don't have traditional waivers like we have. And this is new to them, doing some of the stuff like supports coordination or things like that. So, and remember, Stabenow is the one that developed this at the federal level with our CMH Board Association. So Michigan was thought of in terms of how you would replicate our system throughout the country with CCBHCs. So we're learning, it's a moving target. I wanted to make sure we have the authority to put the county at risk. If indeed this is the case, and according to our corporate counsel, we're not at risk anyway, but I'm managing as if we are. That makes sense. Like, I'm just gonna make pretend we have to manage every dollar precisely the way if it was our own piggy bank and not worry about that, balance the budget. But it's hard when you don't control any of the revenue sources.
Yeah.
Yeah, just ask our
It
providers.
sounds so confusing.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I've been saying for 2 years and I still go. "What?"
Yeah, it's.
It just makes,
Yeah.
like, why? Life is already hard. We have to make another thing that's, no one seems to understand.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Not fair.
I think I know more in the last month and a half than I did the first 7 months. I'm looking at, and I've read just about everything you can read, you know me, but I'm gonna look, but I will tell you, it's confusing. It shouldn't be this confusing, and it is.
That's the
Yeah.
point. It should not be this hard.
Thank you, Amy.
Mhm.
Is there a motion to accept the fiscal year 2025 May financial statement as presented and forward it to the full board with a recommendation for approval? So moved. It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we're on item number 7 on the agenda, public comment. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak? We would welcome you.
I'm not so eloquent off the cuff as my friend, so I've written my sentiments. I'm Becky Bowles. I'm the newer executive director for Harbor House. I know many of you have worked with my predecessor, so it's nice to see you all. On behalf of the Harbor House Ministries, families, residents, and staff, I just want to express our profound gratitude for the support of bringing this forward to the full board for increased rates for our residential services. Our request was never about operational costs. I can highlight that for you all. Rather, it's about upholding our obligation to provide care to the county's most vulnerable individuals. As defined by Chapter 7 of the Michigan Mental Health Code. I too have been reading. Currently, we have 2 available beds, but our severe financial strain has prevented us up until this point from considering new admissions, particularly for residents in our own home county. By supporting this rate increase, or at least the proposal to move it forward, you are not just supporting a program, but you're directly enabling us to fulfill the county's obligation to its most vulnerable citizens, ensuring they receive the care and respect that they are legally entitled to. We can now, hopefully, be able to joyfully welcome and serve more members of our community. The ongoing partnership excites us, and we look forward to continuing to work together. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'm Leslie Brown. I'm the board chair of Harbor House Ministries as well as a parent of my son Justin. And I'd just like to add to Becky's eloquent statement, Dr. Brashears, I want to thank you for understanding the problem that we've been facing. I'm a new board chair and I was stunned to see how perilous our finances were. And the families of our residents I don't know right now how perilous their usually child's care, how much danger they were in. My son can't walk, talk, feed himself, use the bathroom independently, needs 24-hour care. And when we go to an emergency room, doctors are usually, they don't say it, but you can read their faces like, oh my goodness, the amount of medical need he has. So I'm grateful to you all for understanding how perilous the finances were. I want to thank you very much for recommending this to the full board. I'm very grateful, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Brian Moss from MOCA. We do appreciate not only Dr. Shear's support and help, but also the community to look at what is the long-term vision to ensure that we can maintain support in our community. And we do know that it's really difficult leadership, and we do appreciate the support you're able to give us not only today, but also next week. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you all for being here and for all the support you give the board too. Thank you. And at this time, our meeting is adjourned. Look at that.
There you go.
30.
There you go.
Yeah.